So in this module, we're going to talk about the science of change and self-control. So we've already talked about some of the things that are essential. Brain envy, you gotta care. Avoiding things that hurt your brain and doing things that help, and knowing what your motivation is. So we're going to talk about sticking to a plan, improving the quality of your decisions. One of the critical parts I really like, killing the little lies that keep people fat, depressed, and feeble-minded. Breaking the connections, emotional connections to toxic patterns in the past. And this little acronym that has been used in drug treatment for a long time called HALT. Don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And I'm going to add my own little spin on that. If you want to change, the two things to keep healthy are your prefrontal cortex and your anterior cingulate. The anterior cingulate lets you know when something's not right, when there's a temptation. The dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex helps you make good decisions. And the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex becomes depleted when it's challenged too many times. So if you put yourself at risk too many times, you're going to lose the game. So motivation, again, is, of course, why do you care? Change often requires pain. I want you to write down why you care and look at it every day, seeing a future of success and a future of failure, and this exercise we do called the one-page miracle. Starts with one of my favorite stories. Marianne Phillips is the Western Regional Director of Franklin Covey. At the age of 59, she was overweight, she was in chronic pain, she had brain fog, and she was thinking of resigning from the job she loved. Told her daughter this. Her daughter's a special ed teacher who's been following my work for a long time. She got Marianne my book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Body. And Marianne just did everything I wrote about in the book. I love that, because that works when people do that. Within 2 months, the brain fog had lifted, her pain was gone, and then a year later, she introduced me at a Franklin Covey event, and she said for my 60th birthday, she'd lost 60 pounds. Dr. Amen gave me a fast-acting brain with the wisdom of age. I love that. But for her and many people, change requires pain. Now, I think the smart person is like, will see the train coming and get out of the way instead of let it hit them. We talked about having anchor images of those things that immediately remind you of why you must be healthy. So I told you about Emmy, my granddaughter, who was diagnosed with a seizure disorder when she was 5 months old, on a ketogenic diet, and a lot of TLC from her family. Emmy's now 2 years seizure-free. Initially, the doctor said, because she's also diagnosed with a genetic microdeletion syndrome, 17q21.31, that's very rare, and the doctor said she wouldn't walk before 5, if ever. 30% of these kids die by the time they're 3 years old. And I just got a video, she just turned 3, of Emmy that I want to show. So they said she wouldn't walk till 5, well, she's 3. And she's curious and funny, and she walks. So it's critical to know your motivation. Why do you want to be well? Do you want to avoid the dinosaur syndrome? Do you want to have the energy? What's your life's meaning and purpose? So a long time ago, I developed this exercise. It's called the one-page miracle. And basically on one piece of paper, write down, what do you want? And then you look at it every day and you ask yourself, does my behavior get me what I want? I have all of my patients do this. So in your relationships, so in my relationship with my wife, I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship with Tana. But I don't always feel that way. And so I may get the idea to say something that's probably not that helpful. But if I think about what's my goal, that's a frontal lobe function, I'm much more likely to act in ways that are consistent to get me what I want. What kind of relationship do I want to have with my children? I want to be present with them. I want to be emotionally bonded. I want to supervise them until they can supervise themselves. But I had a model from my mother, but totally not from my dad, because my dad worked all the time. So it reminds me not to do with what my default network is for what guys do, they work, but to be present with my extended family, with my friends. What do I want? And it takes a while to develop this, but it's totally worth 2 or 3 sessions to just focus on what people want. And what do you want at work? What's your goal going to work? What do you want with your money? People become much more thoughtful with their money when they have goals for it. And then what do you want for yourself? For your physical health, your emotional health, and your spiritual health. And I find with my patients that if I take the time early on when I see them, and we really develop a very simple one-page miracle, then behavior is never about what I should do. It's never about what you want me to do, what my doctor wants me to do, that of course I have to fight against. It's always about what I want to do. So it's about me. These are my goals. And so with physical health, if I want to be at a healthy weight and want to have healthy energy and a good blood pressure and a good blood sugar, eating right and exercise isn't something I should do, that somebody else thinks I should do, something I want to do for me. Because as soon as you tell people to do something, they sort of push against, especially if they're cingulate people, right? As soon as you say, they're going to say the opposite. But when it's about them, they buy into it so much more. So what kind of relationship do you want to have with your wife? What can you do about that? It's very powerful. It used to be just a file on my computer called goal setting. And I changed it to the one-page miracle because when people did this exercise, radically changed their attitude toward getting well, because it was about them. I also do a fork in the road exercise. This was actually a hypnotic exercise I did with my patients. And then I realized I really didn't have to put them in a trance. I want them to vividly imagine, if you keep on the track that you have now, what's your life going to be like? So if you keep eating the burgers and fries and sodas, if you keep eating on the run, if you keep not sleeping, if you don't get your sleep apnea really under control, what's your life going to be like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now? And I want you to imagine that in great detail. So decreased mental capacity, ill health, smaller brain, older appearance, lower income, strained relationships, always feeling tired. So imagine what your life is going to be like if you don't do the right things. And then, of course, imagine what your life is going to be like if you do the right things. So if I start today, what will my life be like a month from now, 6 months from now? So last year, so I guess about 6 months ago, Tan and I did a brain-body turnaround weekend. So we do this conference twice a year. And Sherry was a woman in the audience who was morbidly obese and had tried everything, she said. But we put her on the program, the same program we've been talking about. And in the first 2 weeks, she lost 10 pounds. So she's like really excited. And now she's down 50 pounds. Now she's only a quarter of the way to her goal. And so it really depends on how you look at it. It's like, oh, well, I'm only a quarter of the way, or it took me 20 years to get here. I'm a quarter of the way in 6 months. Imagine what my life is going to be a year from now, or 2 years from now. So it's critical. And when she had a week where she didn't lose weight and she felt like giving up, It's so clear to have this fork in her head. It's, yes, I can go back to where I was, and where did that leave me? Hypertension, diabetes, chronic pain, tiredness. Or if I stay on the path, I already have no pain, better energy, better focus. I'm so much happier. Stay on the path. So you want to get them down each road because it helps them make better decisions to stay on the right path. Temptations are everywhere. They're just everywhere in our society. And most of us are blind and outnumbered. There's a constant stream of negative influences. I travel a lot, and I'm just uniformly horrified by the opportunities to make bad decisions. And the food companies, they're slick, and they have effective advertising. So just think of Vegas, Disneyland, fast food restaurants, airport vendors, grocery store checkout counters. Nearly everywhere you look, somebody is trying to make money by shoving bad food down your throat. So I really have a warrior mentality because there are people, I mean, they're out to make money on my early illness, and then they make money on my illness. It's not helpful. It's not rational. I have drawn this diagram in my office for virtually every one of my patients. So I have a whiteboard. You should have a whiteboard in your office. So during the first session, I go, it's very important the attitude you have towards setbacks. I said, everybody has setbacks. Nobody just goes from bad to better. It's always a process. And so I go to the board and I go, okay, when people come to see me, they have good days and bad days. But generally, they're not very good. And then we intervene, just like we talked about with the Amen Clinics method. And people get better. I mean, that's like so exciting. But nobody just gets better. They get better, and then they fall back. And then they get better, and then they fall back. And then they get better, and then they fall back. And it's critical to study the fallback days and not to let them defeat you. Because if you study them, if you turn the bad days into good data, you'll figure out what happened. Well, you didn't sleep, or you didn't take your medication or your supplements, or you got off your diet, or you didn't exercise, which is why journaling is often very important. I have my patients journal. Just the act of journaling, all by itself, has been found to double weight loss in 10 weeks, according to a big study from Kaiser. And I think of it like a GPS device. So if I set my phone to help me get from here to there, and I go the wrong way, the phone does not call me a stupid idiot. The phone just says, make the next legal U-turn. And that's where it becomes critical, not to swear at yourself, a lot of people do that, or be hard on yourself, but to go, what happened? What can I do better the next day? To stick to a change plan, you have to decide what you truly want, so that's motivation. Identify your vulnerable moments, journaling. You have to know what you need to do. So if it's not being depressed, we've talked about diet, exercise, supplements. We'll talk about not believing every stupid thought you have. So you have to identify the vital behaviors. And then you have to surround yourself with the right people that promote health rather than promote illness. So I like this term, turn accomplices into friends. So bad or good habits, they're a team sport. You need lots of accomplices to start and sustain bad habits. So an accomplice is someone who helps you stay sick. So if you're depressed, it's someone you hang out with that's also depressed, that's focused on all the negative things in their life. If you just spend time around that person, people are contagious. Did you know that? They actually did a study where if they put college freshmen in dorm rooms with other people that are depressed, they are more likely to become depressed. If they put them in rooms with students who are doing well, they are more likely to do well. So friends, mentors, coaches, those are people who support your positive behavior. So you want to ask for their help. Accomplices are people who encourage your negative behaviors or who are complicit with your negative behavior. Adding friends improves your chances of success up to 40%. It's especially true for addictions. And you know, in addiction treatment, the most important thing is to change the people you hang out with, because people are contagious. From a food standpoint, the nutritional gatekeeper must be your friend. If it's not your friend, then you're in trouble. If you want to change, you need to change your friends or turn accomplices into friends or people with whom you spend little or no time. Now, this is very hard because people come in and say, my husband's totally not a friend. In fact, he demands bad food. And that's where we have people make a stand. That, you know, he can go make whatever bad food he wants, but you're not making it for him. We did this big project I was telling you about at Saddleback, and I was there one Sunday and a woman came up to me and she said, I lost 35 pounds. I'm like, congratulations. She goes, no, that's not the deal. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, when I started, my husband was 300 pounds and he wasn't going to do the program with me. And I said, I'm done making bad food. You want to make it? It's up to you. And he was really upset. But I'm like, I'm not going to help you be sick. And she said, I'm going to be happy and healthy long after you're dead. And I'm like, wow. But as I got well, she said, he then wanted what I have. And he's now down 75 pounds. And oh, by the way, my children are better too. So often we have to take a stand. She wasn't mean. She was just clear. Many accomplices can change into friends if you have crucial conversations with them. This is important to me. This is why this is important to me. And you have to call them out. I remember when my daughter had my first grandchild, one of her mother's friends was over the house, and she asked me if I wanted something to eat. And I said no. And then she asked me again, and I said no. And then she asked me again, and I said no. And then it's like the sixth time she asked me, I looked at her and I said, why do you want me to eat something when I'm not hungry and I don't want to eat? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry. People don't do that. Because of their level of anxiety, when people push them, they're food pushers, people give in to shut them up because they don't want to deal with the anxiety. But I found that if you just be really clear 2 or 3, maybe 4 times if they have learning problems, that people will get it and they'll start to respect your requests. And if they don't respect your requests, then you have to ask yourself, why are you spending more time with them? So you want to explain what they can start doing, what they can stop doing, what they continue to do for help. And of course, you have to improve the quality of your decisions. And this is just because I have a deranged mind. I walk down the street and I see somebody who's really unhealthy and I think to myself, a lot of really bad decisions went into that body. Or if I see someone who's actually pretty healthy and I think to myself, a lot of really good decisions went into that body. I mean, because ultimately it's the quality of your decisions that determine how healthy you are. So I was on the Dr. Phil show, and I've been on a number of times. And in April 2010, we did a story on sex addicts or compulsive cheaters. And they sent me a number of people to scan. And this is Jose. When we scanned Jose, he had cheated on his wife 8 times in the 4 years they were together, at least 8 times we knew about. Dr. Phil said, my father said, if you see a rat, odds are there are 50 other rats in the wall. And when we scanned Jose, he had decreased activity in the front part of his brain, but also decreased activity in the back part of his brain in a coup, contra coup pattern. And so I went, Jose, did you ever have a brain injury? And he said, no. And I went, well, are you sure? He said, I don't think so. I said, did you ever play sports? He said, yeah, I played football. So what was your position? He said, linebacker. I said, did you ever get your bell rung? He said, yeah, like every game. And I also did mixed martial arts and got hit in the head a lot. And then under his breath, so I could barely hear, he said, and I was a headbanger. I'm like, excuse me? He said, well, it was sort of like a party trick. I could take a bottle of beer, a glass bottle of beer, break it with my skull. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not the sign of intelligent life. But I have good frontal lobe, so I didn't say that. And then, when we're at parties and we get drunk, we would see who could put the biggest hole in the doors or in the walls. And then I couldn't help myself. And I said, that's not the sign of intelligent life. And he said, I don't do that anymore. But he had low activity in his frontal lobes. And people who have low activity in their frontal lobes are often excitement-seeking, drama-driven, and what's more exciting than to be with one woman and have an affair with another woman. So I went on Dr. Phil and we talked about the imaging and why people do what they do. And afterwards, I started treating Jose. And now it's 4 years later, I actually still treat him. And what did I do? I put him on our brain repair formula, and I put him on focus and energy. And I cleaned up his diet, and I got him to exercise, and I made sure that he ate 4 or 5 times a day, protein at each meal, to protect his impulse control. And then I asked him why he cared. And he has a daughter by the name of Bella, who at the time was 3. And he said, I don't want Bella to be raised in a broken home. I was raised in a broken home by a father who cheated on his mother. So he had the modeling of a cheater. So we have motivation, we have brain repair, we have nutrition and exercise. We did the one-page miracle, so he was really clear what he wanted. He wanted to be married to Angela. And he's doing great. And about 6 months later, 7 months later, they're doing so well they decide to have another child. Now, if it was me and I was Angela, I'd wait for 3 years. I mean, I'd be more patient. So they go to Hawaii to start making this new child. And while they're there, they see people jumping off a waterfall, like into the water below. And Jose sees it, and he's like, his first impulse is to go up. So he goes up the hill, and Angela is at the bottom, and she rolls her eyes and thinks to herself, show off. And as he gets in line to jump off the cliff, he begins to think about these 2 words that I taught him. Then what? If I do this, then what happens? If I say this, then what happens? He even taught me about the Clay Walker song, Then What? So there's a whole song about a guy who's thinking about cheating on his wife. And his friend is trying to get him to think those 2 words. Then what happens when people see you as a cheater and nobody trusts you and you ruin your family? How are you going to feel about yourself? Then what? And so Jose is the one who told me about the song. And so we talk about those 2 words all the time in our conversations. And as he gets close to the cliff and he looks down, he says to himself, I don't know if there are rocks underneath the water. He said, people are jumping and they're coming out okay, but what if I break my neck? Then what will happen to Bella? Then what will happen to Angela? And so he steps out of line and he's thinking about this. And he's been an excitement-seeking, drama-driven junkie for a long time. And then he decides, I don't have to do this. And he walked down the hill. And Angela's like all upset. It's like, honey, what's the matter? And he said, I just don't have to do this anymore. He said, it doesn't serve me. And the next week they came into my office and he's telling me this story and I'm like, I got to scan him. I think we've just given him frontal lobes because that's where then what exists. And when we scanned him, his frontal lobes and his occipital lobes, which had been hurt from the traumatic brain injuries he'd had, were better. No medicine, diet, exercise, simple supplements, and some psychological strategies involving those two words. Then what? And it's 4 years later. And his prognosis was terrible. I mean, if you just think about it, what's the prognosis of someone who's a chronic cheater? It's terrible. But it's because very few people treat addicts with all four circles in mind. So we have the biology, repairing the trauma. We have the psychological strategies of forward thinking, making sure he hangs out with people who support his sobriety with a deep level of meaning and purpose. Then what? To actually have someone made a carving for me. I have those two words in my office, and I think about them all the time. Of course, being married to a redheaded woman, you have to think about them. So here's another story. I was giving a lecture in Northern California for my book, The Amen Solution, The Secrets to Being Thinner, Smarter, and Happier. So I wrote 2 consecutive books on the connection between physical health and emotional health. And Chris comes up to me at the lecture. And it happens to me a lot. She came up to me and then she starts crying. And I wait for her to stop crying. And she said, 2 years ago, my daughter Sammy died of bone cancer. And part of me was glad she died because bone cancer is so wicked and she was in so much pain. And I was happy she was out of pain. But I had no idea how hard it would hit me. And I went to bed. And I ate bad food and I drank alcohol just to numb myself. And pretty soon I was really overweight, panicked, depressed. And on the 2-year anniversary of Sammy's death, I was going to kill myself because I was just worthless to my family. And then by random chance, I saw you on television and I decided to get your book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Body. And if it was a bad book, I was going to kill myself the next day. And I'm thinking to myself, holy smokes, what you write is really important. And she said, but I just did everything you said. And within 8 days, I lost my cravings. And I started sleeping. And I didn't wake up feeling panicked. And now, it was 10 weeks later, she dropped 35 pounds. And this is her a year later. And she said, of course I still miss her. But she wouldn't want me to be like I was. And she said, I want you to tell the people you talk to never let grief be your excuse to hurt yourself. It's a very powerful message. That when people get sad, it's almost like they get a license to do bad things that make them worse. And we need to help them make the right decisions because they'll feel better. So you want to always protect your decision-making ability. So how do you do that? Roy Baumeister is the one that wrote Willpower. He said the best way to reduce stress in your life is to stop screwing up. So, what's the research say? If you have these 2 words in your head, it really helps you. Being forward thinking. Stabilizing your blood sugar. So how do you do that? You have to eat. If you don't eat, you'll never lose weight. You'll never get to healthy weight if you try to starve yourself. It just won't work. 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night, little to no alcohol because alcohol drops the judgment centers, and you want to eliminate the lies that drive failure. This is so important. And of course, you have to know your motivation. The little lies that drive failure. How you think dramatically affects how you feel in every decision you make. The lies you tell yourself are one of the biggest factors that drive illness. Here are some of the most common and destructive lies. I don't want to deprive myself. But doesn't eating bad food deprive you of what you really want, which is your health, which is your most precious resource? What is worth more? Energy, a trim waistline, health, or the mountain of fries, sodas, cakes, cookies, hamburgers, and the like you've consumed over the last decade? I can't eat healthy because I travel. I'm always amused by this one because I travel a lot. It just takes forethought and planning. I'd love to say God gave you a big brain for a reason. My whole family is overweight. It is in my genes. It's one of the biggest lies. Genes account for only 20 to 30% of your health. The vast majority of health problems are driven by bad decisions people make. My genes say I should fat, but I don't make decisions anymore that make it likely to happen. I can't afford to get healthy. Being sick is always more expensive than getting healthy. I can't find time to work out. With a sharper mind, you'll actually save time if you work out. It's Easter, Memorial Day, July 4th, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. There's always an excuse to hurt yourself. When you stop believing every thought you have, the quality of your decisions will go way up. Here's an example with a patient. So Nancy, 55, was trying to get healthy, and she came into my office and said she felt sad because she'd no longer be baking cookies with her grandchildren. The time spent baking cookies, brownies, and cakes with her grandmother was a treasured part of her childhood. So the pattern from the past and negative thinking was trying to hijack her brain and ruin her progress. This was the dialogue I had with her. Let's play it out, I said. You're feeling sad because it's not in your best interest to bake cookies with your granddaughters. Yes, she replied. So why would you not bake cookies with them? Well, for one, it would ruin my program. The smell of freshly baked cookies is too much to resist. Any other reason? Well, if I bake cookies with them, I'm planting the seeds of illness in their minds, like my grandmother unknowingly did to me. Or in my case, my grandfather. Cookies and other baked goods are mood foods for me. They totally remind me of my grandmother's love. I replied, I suppose if you don't bake cookies or cakes or other toxic foods with them, then there's no other option to spend high quality time with them. At which point she said, Dr. Heyman, that is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard you say. Of course there are other things I can do with them. Actually, I'm sitting here thinking I can teach them to cook in healthy ways. They can help me make great smoothies, salads, guacamole, vegetable trays, low glycemic fruit plates. I can give them a legacy of health that they can give with their grandchildren. And that way they won't have these toxic, stupid thoughts. People often say the smartest things. I also asked her, I said, what happened to your grandmother? She died of Alzheimer's disease. It's the thoughts that ruin us, right? The 4 circles. Never forget the 4 circles, right? We've talked a lot about the brain and the physical health of the brain. But one of the biggest things that sabotage the physical health of the brain is the stupid thoughts that people have. It's the psychological health of the brain. It's your mind's not right. Or you're hanging out with the wrong people. It's the social thing. Now, you don't have to get rid of all of your family and friends. Be the leader. When you are the leader and you begin to model a new way of living, they often come with you. And of course, it all starts with knowing why you're here. What's your sense of meaning and purpose? So we're always getting well in these 4 circles. In breaking the connections to the past, it's just important when people say, I can't do this or I can't do that, to really begin to understand why. So you just have to ask the right questions. Get patients or the people you coach to observe patterns from the past that they're having trouble letting go of. Nancy's pattern clearly was not only hurting her, but it was also hurting the people she loved. And I find when you get people connected to the people they love, it helps them change their behavior. So let's talk about some of the barriers. What are some of the barriers to getting really well? We'll talk about Halt Plus, we'll talk about cravings, food pushers, unhealthy friends, environmental stresses, plateaus, a little bit about shift work, traveling, medications, and unhealthy treatment providers. Isn't that interesting? I mean, you really have to live the message. If you don't live the message, you're just not a good messenger. In the addiction treatment field, they've been using this term HALT for a long time to help prevent relapse. And what it means is don't get too hungry. So you want to eat frequent, small, high-quality meals, and then also nutritional supplements to balance your blood sugar. It's a theme we're going to go back to over and over again. Blood sugar goes low, blood flow to the frontal lobes go low, more bad decisions. Don't get too angry. So it's critical to maintain control over your emotions and the ants that try to infest your mind. You know, ANT stands for automatic negative thoughts. Don't get too lonely. Social skills and a positive social network are critical to success, so friends, not accomplices. And don't get too tired, because low levels of sleep, low blood flow, more bad decisions. So make sleep a priority to boost brain function and improve judgment and self-control. And so, like we've been talking about sleep, we've been talking about brain envy, avoid bad, do good. I want people to develop sleep envy. I mean, to really think this is critical for them. And then avoid things that hurt sleep and do things that help it. So the things that hurt sleep, caffeine if you're sensitive to it, exercise later in the day, too much stimulation before bed. It's often good to turn off devices an hour before bed and don't leave them on. Make sure the room is dark, 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 because light will wake you up, and make sure it's not warm. Colder rooms actually go with better sleep. Some people, because of all the devices we have, they're sensitive to blue light, and so having them buy blue light blockers, you can get them on Amazon, they're not very expensive, has been shown to enhance the quality of sleep. And then brain health. So if you have the brain healthy habits, all of these things will help prevent relapse. So how do you get your cravings under control? Balance your blood sugar. So it's just critical. We've talked about this. Lower blood sugar levels, lower blood flow to the brain, more bad decisions, poor impulse control. So many people try to lose weight, skip breakfast. But skipping breakfast is associated with smoking, alcohol use, and being sedentary. Breakfast is important. Now, every day, I pretty much start the day with a shake, but it's different. It's made with water, protein powder, vegetables, a little bit of fruit, and the fruit's usually low glycemic berries. I like frozen blueberries. And I put my vitamin D in it, and it's just awesome. I know how many calories, and I don't feel hungry till lunch. Some supplements to help balance blood sugar, chromium and alpha lipoic acid, and also to maintain blood sugar levels, smaller meals throughout the day. And stay away from simple sugars. And the reason to do that is they trigger cravings. You want to know and optimize your vitamin D level. Low levels of vitamin D are associated with more cravings because the hormone leptin doesn't work to turn off your appetite. Boost your omega-3 fatty acids, eliminate refined sugars, sodas, fruit juices, and artificial sweeteners. We've talked about this. Some artificial sweeteners are 600 times sweeter than sugar. They can trigger cravings. Stress triggers cravings. I really like hypnosis and meditation. And both of those things from an imaging standpoint fooled us, because we thought they would sort of lower activity in the brain. They totally don't. They both boost frontal lobe function. One study that we did on a Kundalini yoga form of meditation called Kirtan Kriya. What you do for 12 minutes is it's a chanting meditation. Sa, ta, na, ma. Sa, ta, na, ma. Sa, ta, na, ma. 2 minutes out loud, 2 minutes whispering. 4 minutes silently to yourself, then 2 minutes whispering, 2 minutes out loud, you're done. perfect for my ADD population. What we found immediately raised blood flow to the frontal lobes. And after 8 weeks, they did a study at the University of Pennsylvania. Andrew Newberg did the study. At 8 weeks, it increased resting blood flow to the front part of the brain. So we're pretty excited about that. Critical to manage food triggers. So know your vulnerable spots and plan ahead. So for me, it could be the movie theaters or going over to my mom's house to eat. I remember some holidays, she makes this amazing pizza. At Christmas, I'd have like 8 or 10 slices and just feel like a slug. I'm like, what is the matter with you? So now, when I know it's a vulnerable time, I go fed. So I actually go over there having eaten so that I have a good blood sugar. So maybe I'll have a piece, but that's it. Hidden food allergies can trigger cravings, especially gluten and milk, because they can lower blood flow. There's actually a study, a SPECT study, on people who are sensitive to gluten. When they ate it, they got overall lower blood flow to their brain. Sugar and fat act on the nucleus accumbens, so they act on the brain's addiction centers. There's a whole new sort of field of nutrition on looking at food addictions. But I love donuts, and I can't give them up. So we had a woman in one of our classes, in one of Tana's classes, who said that. It's like she couldn't imagine her life without donuts. And so Tana, the next class, had these slides ready for her. That chronic hyperglycemia, she was diabetic, and she had a blood sugar that was about 170 most of the time. Leads to diabetes. That hyperglycemics and diabetics leads to skin ulcerations and neuropathy. That it's common for diabetics to have parts of their limbs amputated. That diabetes leads to blindness. That it's been associated with Alzheimer's disease. In fact, some people call Alzheimer's disease diabetes type 3. That depression is one of the most common side effects of being obese. That sugar feeds cancer cells. Hyperinsulinemia has been associated with many forms of cancer. That sugar and trans fats lead to elevated cholesterol, vascular, and heart disease. Sugar and trans fats lead to coronary artery disease and strokes. Sugar is a cause of rapid aging and wrinkles. This 39-year-old woman ate a lot of sugar. Fructose is toxic to the liver and leads to non-alcoholic fatty liver. Excessive fructose can lead to hypertension and gout. She didn't eat donuts anymore after that. I think as physicians, we know the consequences of diabetes when it's not properly controlled. And so we tell patients to get their blood sugar under control, but we don't take the time to educate them on the future of fear, because we know it, we assume they know it, and we don't take the time that it really takes. And my father-in-law had diabetes when he was 55. He died when he was 84. He had every bad complication, from having his legs amputated to going blind to being demented. It's a disaster when left untreated. I like to motivate people with positive things, see the benefit, but if it totally doesn't work, I will go after them with the dinosaur syndrome. Now, when I came up with the dinosaur syndrome, I was actually on a plane. I'd read the study from the University of Pittsburgh that said as your weight goes up, the size of your brain goes down. And I'm sitting next to a very large woman, and half of her body is in my chair. Now, it's one of the benefits of being small, is you have more leg room. And I thought to myself, you should tell her she doesn't want to be a dinosaur. Big body, little brain, you're going to become extinct. And then the next thought I had was, shut your mouth. I don't know if you had a mother like mine, but mine used to say, if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything at all. And so I didn't say anything. And when I got home from the trip, I told Tana, my wife, about the dinosaur syndrome. And she said, shut your mouth. Don't ever say that out loud. It's like, you have enough trouble with people. But then 2 weeks later, I was at GNC in Pittsburgh, the supplement company, and we were going to do business together. And their marketing director, Tom, was morbidly obese, which irritated me. Because if you don't live the message of your work, you're just not a good messenger. But I'm polite because we're doing business together. And then he took me out to dinner, and Tana was with me to the Capitol Grill in Pittsburgh. And I'm watching what he's ordering for dinner, and I'm disturbed. From the mac and cheese to... And when he ordered 2 soufflés for dessert, I'm like, I couldn't stand it anymore. And I'm like, Tom, you want to avoid the dinosaur syndrome. At which point my wife kicked me under the table. It gave me that look that only your wife can give you, like, what the hell is the matter with you? But Tom was really interested. He's like, well, what do you mean? I said, Tom, they did this study here in Pittsburgh. They did MRI studies, and they compared healthy people to overweight people to people who were in the obese category. And the people who were overweight, who had a BMI between 25 and 30, they had 4% less brain tissue, and their brains looked 8 years older than healthy people. He's like, really? I said, and the people were obese who had a BMI over 30? I said, do you know your BMI? He said, yeah, it's 38. They had 8% less volume in their brain, and their brain looked 16 years older than healthy people. He's 43. I said, Tom, are you done? Are you at the pinnacle of your career and you don't want to do more? He's like, no, I'm not done. I said, well, you need your brain to be healthy so you can be the best. But he said, I went to my cardiologist. My numbers are all fine. I said, but you've not looked at your brain. He's like, okay, I get it. A month later, he wrote to me that he'd lost 17 pounds, that he was serious, that he wanted to have a better body and a better brain. When I saw him recently, he'd lost 80 pounds, and he looked so much better. And now his BMI is like 26. And I'm so happy for him. And then, shortly thereafter, was doing a public television special, and I'm like, do I put the dinosaur syndrome in? Do I not put the dinosaur syndrome in? And I decided to do it. And it's not popular, but it's the truth. Because now there are 140 studies. And I have had so many people come up to me. None of the people have hated me for telling the truth, because I try to say it in love. But I've had people saying, I've lost 100 pounds, I've lost 150 pounds, I've lost 70 pounds, I've lost 80 pounds, because I don't want to be a dinosaur. And can you get it back if you've lost it? And the answer seems to be yes. That we've seen many people, and I've shown you slides, people who got healthy, brain got bigger. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better, but you have to care.